Spontaneous or scheduled sex, different types of desire, initiation, duty sex, intimacy in marriage. These are all things that we'll be discussing in today's video.
We're going to talk about the next part of our sacred sensuality system to help you and your spouse work through some areas to help enhance your intimacy.
Okay, if you missed part 1, it is down below in the link so you can check that out. But I really wanted to give you just a really quick overview of the sacred sensuality system. That way you don't feel confused at what part of the sexual intimacy that we're talking about today. Okay, so at the very top of the model, you see sensual setup. Then this is all the stuff that is before sex. Emotional, spiritual, any type of complications that you might be avoiding, just ultimately the things that lead you or lead you away from the bedroom. Then what we'll be talking about today is scheduled or spontaneous time. Then you move around to spark or secondary desire. We'll get much more in depth with this. Then next week we'll discuss spectacular sensations and or satisfaction, as well as snuggles and smiles afterwards. In the middle of the model we talk about affirming and inviting, and that's from the Song of Solomon. And then there's also spiritual, emotional, and physical, so you're able to understand the full impact of intimacy and truly connecting and not just having sex.
All right, so let's talk about scheduled versus spontaneous.
So initiation is huge. This is key. So if you are not talking or beginning to initiate spontaneous or scheduled sex, that means you're not having sex.
That's right.
So in initiation, you want to be able to be open with your spouse and find out if you actually know what the other spouse is doing when they're trying to initiate.
It's true.
What does initiation look like for you? You may think you're initiating with your spouse and they honestly have no clue that you're initiating. They just totally missed it.
Right.
So communicating those things are really huge, and asking them, how would you like it for me to initiate?
Yeah.
What things would you like? But just being able to discuss and being able to initiate is really going to be key to move forward in the cycle. So an adorable example of initiation that I just love, I know I've shared this before, but this sweet little old couple, she would actually flip her little pillow. So they had a specific decorative pillow on the bed, and if the pillow was flipped, it was a go. But if it was not, it was a no-go. So I just thought that was super cute. And what's interesting about that is that wouldn't have made any sense without communicating, without talking. They could not have even come up with this concept without really communicating.
Right, talking is definitely important if you're going to communicate with your spouse about scheduling. Be it verbal or with body language, communication is key. Now, we've talked a lot about scheduling on this channel. We've got a link down below for a specific video that I think will really help you if you implement it into your marriage. Another important part is planning. And I think planning is overlooked because planning can really be important because it's in the planning that you really get to show your spouse through your efforts in the planning how much you truly love and adore them.
And planning can be spontaneous and your spouse doesn't know about it, or
That's true.
It can be scheduled. So either way, but putting forth that effort is really key. So another thing to think about is the physical setup.
Yeah.
So are you both comfortable? Do you like to change it up? Do you like to have the same space, a clean space? Is it private? I know I had one couple where the wife was not remotely comfortable being with her husband because the door was broken and it wouldn't lock and she had kids. And it was like the simplest solution ever. It's like, well, fix the door. Like, it's not rocket science. So being able to think through those things and, what kind of items do you need to bring to the bedroom, whatever it is, just thinking through and being able to really set up a space that you're both comfortable with.
Another thing to think about is your energy level. Do you have the energy to be intimate in the first place?
Also, again, last week we talked about the sensual setup. So if you missed it, check it out. But this is where we talked about all the things that help you either move towards or away from the bedroom. And those all apply to setting up a scheduled or spontaneous time together. So for example, if you're fighting and bickering all the time or you're not communicating very well, that's going to roll into can you communicate about a time to get together? Like, these are things that are still going to affect you. Sensory issues, are you avoiding something? If that's the case, you're going to kind of avoid your partner. Just all those kind of things that we discussed in that video, take into consideration, but you get the idea.
If you have anything you'd like to add to the conversation or you have a question for us, we'd love to hear from you. Just drop it in the comments below. Let's talk about the spark and secondary desire. Now, the spark, as we use it, describes that natural desire that you have for your spouse.
And so secondary desire is really when you weren't actually thinking about sex more than likely and just don't really have the chemicals and the hormones and everything lined up for you to actually have your own desire or arousal. But usually what happens is you make a decision, you head to the bedroom, touching takes place, and then usually your body catches up and your mind catches up, and then you're like, oh, I'm actually interested. And so again, this is kind of secondary. It doesn't mean it's less, it's just that you didn't actually have the hormones aligned and the desire right away. And this is something that a lot of women have. And so sometimes it feels as if they don't have a desire, but that's not necessarily the case. It's just desire that comes later on than the initial, perhaps, on your own desire.
Some obvious complications to this would be sexual dysfunctions, and specifically desire disorders.
Absolutely. So you could have low desire due to like medication complications, or perhaps you're someone struggling with hormone issues, and you can always go to a doctor or a gynecologist and get a panel. You can a hormone panel. You want to also make sure they test for your free testosterone levels so that they can get the whole picture too.
And guys, do not be afraid to go to the doctor as well.
Absolutely. Sometimes it can be something as simple as just mismatched
Yeah.
desire levels. So the most recent study I think I saw was 1 in 4 couples, the woman has the higher desire. And honestly, I think that's a little low. I think it's actually a little bit more that the woman has a higher desire than that. But more frequently than not, the man has the higher desire. But being able to work through that as a couple and knowing through the myths as well. So all the stuff that we talked about as well in the sensual setup video, those things also still apply for, if you're avoiding anything, that also will cause you not to move forward in the desire section. So if sex is painful, who wants to have painful sex? Of course you're going to avoid that. So those are also things to take into consideration when it comes to it.
Just a few suggestions on desire. God designed sex to be a connecting experience that provides mutual satisfaction. So duty sex, it's not good for anybody.
So with duty sex, basically what this is when you don't want to have sex, but you do it anyway, like out of obligation. So it's different than if you make a decision. So for example, with the secondary desire, you weren't thinking about sex, but you were still willing to show up. It wasn't negative for you.
Right.
As long as it's not negative, that's fine. But when you're in your head screaming, I don't want to do this, and you're watching the clock, for example, just so that your husband will be nicer, that's duty sex. So that's the stuff that you want to avoid. Again, decision is okay, but when you're into duty sex, that's the stuff that's not good for your marriage. Another thing is increased foreplay. So a lot of women enjoy and sometimes need it to be a longer amount of time. So sometimes for women it takes a lot longer for their brains to shut down. They have a massive to-do list going on, and it's harder for them to really relax and soak in the pleasure.
That's why it's important sometimes for the husband to allow the wife to lead, using the biblical model. Affirm her and let her invite you into intimacy.
Another thing I think is really important in being able to understand a woman's desire is being able to consider her female cycle. So it's really important that you're able to pay attention to your own ebbs and flows in regards to your cycle and being able to know your levels of desire. So a lot of times women just have more desire around when they're ovulating. Obviously, God wanted us to be fruitful and multiply and make babies. And so this is the time of month that your body says, let's go make a baby. So I do not think it's wise to try to make a baby every month at that time, but this is just a time that women are more receptive and more interested in being able to have lovemaking. Again, not the only time, so pay attention to your own cycle.
Also, side note for husbands, try not to negate your wife's secondary desire just because, or make her feel bad, just because her hormones didn't align the way that you wanted them to. Both desires are normal and both are great.
I think there's a lot of men that really feel, my wife is broken, she never has desire, when a lot of times she does. It's just secondary. It's just not right away. So that's something to make sure you consider in being able to be respectful of one another. We go much more in depth in our Sacred Sensuality course. So this is our beta course. We're really excited about it. Look below to find out more about it and also book a discovery call to see if we'd be a good fit for you.
Next week, we're going to finish up our sensual system and we're going to talk about spectacular sensations and/or satisfaction and snuggles and smiles. Say that 5 times fast.
So while you wait, check out these other great videos, subscribe, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye.
Bye.